Hi, everybody. This is Ann Patchett at Parnassus Books. Thank you for listening to Parnassus Presents. Your support allows us to keep bringing you fantastic events. So please consider purchasing a copy of tonight's featured book at the link below. We hope you enjoy the event, recorded live from the Parnassus stage.
Hello, everybody, and thank you for coming out. We're going to get started here. My name is RJ Witherow. I'm the events manager here at Parnassus Books, and I'm so glad to see so many people here tonight. Tonight, we are really excited because we're welcoming local author, speaker, and activist Prisca Dorcas Mojica Rodríguez for her new book, Tías and Primas. And we are extra excited because she is in conversation with the assistant professor of religion, culture, and psychology at Vanderbilt, Yara González-Justiniano. Join me in welcoming Prisca and Yara.
Qué nervios. Thank you for coming. This is exciting and nerve-wracking. This is my first book event in Nashville, so it's a big deal. Thank you.
I just get to be Gare as a fangirl, so I'm lucky.
Be cool.
I'm trying really hard. So thank you again for showing up. I see some familiar faces, so thank you for being here and supporting. We will just have a conversation. So you'll just be looking in, and then we'll have some time for a Q&A, and just hoping to for you to really enjoy not just the conversation, but this beautiful, beautiful work of love. So, yeah.
I will say you're going to get a glimpse of two friends talking. This is Dr. González. This is like an official person, but I knew her as Yara. We met in grad school. We were both MDivs at the same time. She was at BU and I was at Vanderbilt. And so it is a different sort of disarming conversation, which was intentional for me. So, yeah, we're two girls just gabbing.
Yeah. So, first question. I just love this book. It was, as I was reading it, I had to keep putting it down. I read one tía or one prima, and I was like, let me sit down and cry a little. So the book that I have is kind of like not the pretty carpeta one, but I have this one that's already all folded and marked, and different pages marked just different stages where I was at. So it was a joy to read because it was kind of like a journeying with. And so I'm wondering, what was your thinking around the structure of the book? Because it's your voice, it is you writing. It's the same author as for Brown Girls, but it's a different structure. So how were you constructing it and thinking it as you're thinking about Tías and Primas?
It's a different genre. The first book was like autobiographical. And it had no real structure. The publisher didn't know what to do with it, really. They were like, there's no genre for this. I heard a lot in the writing process. This one was like, I know what I'm good at. I know I'm good at telling stories. So how do I make that happen because this is like, we've read books like this. These archetypes, we've read them in like Feminist 101. So I read Second Sex. I read Women Who Run with Wolves. I read these like types of books that talk about women, the mother, the old woman, the young girl. So I've read all that stuff, and so I knew that I wanted to kick it off with that, but storytelling had to lead it. Because it's one of the first quotes that I wrote in the intro, which is like, storytelling is community building. So how do I get my stories to function as a mirror? And so it was just that. It was like, okay, I need to tell the story. I need to like position this person as like a real person. So I need to describe her. How does she smell? What does she feel like? What do her hugs feel like? What's her hair texture like? Like, I was thinking about all these things as I was constructing her to then go into the prescriptive part of it, which was like, this is what the family of this person should be doing. This is what this person should be doing, which were like scary. It's scary to tell people what to do. And it's scary to position yourself as any type of expert. I don't think of myself as an expert. So yeah, I knew that I wanted it to look a certain way, and it was scary all along the way, making it look and feel that way. But ultimately, it's the structure that felt the best when I was deciding it all. Yeah.
And there is so much grounding in it because so you have the pictures, right? And you can kind of see into the world. So the Tia that loves plants and animals, I'm like, I was in her house. I'm in her living room. I'm seeing the 49 birds. I'm wondering about what it smells like with all the dogs and the animals. But just in that world, because you're talking about these archetypes, but they're very complex individuals, and you do not, you don't try to present them in any kind of binary. You try to bring in the complexities and weave yourself and the pieces of you in that process. And I think that was just done really beautifully, which is why, like, I'm thinking about the structure of the archetype, but how all of the chapters had a particular cadence, which is why I could be, I'm done with this Tia, I'm done with this Prima, I'm moving on to the next one.
Yeah. And I wanted it to feel, not everyone's a reader. I think that's like a normal thing. So I think Brown Girls sort of hit you like a train, and it was meant to. I wanted this book to invite a different kind of reader. The Brown Girl reader would already be bought in. The Brown Girl reader was already like, I'm in it, I'm gonna buy it because I know Prisca and I know what she's writing. But I wanted a different reader that was gonna need shorter chapters. It was gonna be really concise. And there was gonna be an element of fun. I wanted it to feel fun, because it is so, the Brown Girls, if anyone listened to the audiobook, like, I couldn't get through it without like sobbing. And that my audio producer was like, you know what, we're just gonna leave the tears. Like, we can't do anything with, like, if you can't get a clean take, we can't get a clean take. So I needed a different kind of book for a different kind of person that wasn't willing to go all the way to the deep end of the pool and needed to wade a little bit in the 3-foot deep side. Yeah.
Especially if you're able to get past the matriarca, right? Like,
the matriarca comes in
hot. Comes in really hot. Like, I didn't see that coming. And so it's a chapter that I kind of, because again, you start seeing yourself in many of the archetypes, right? And then that's why I say that it's not just about, it's the complexity about the individual that you're having in mind, but also you seeing yourself in it and holding that mirror. So I'm just thinking about, especially the generations that pecan de esto, I don't even know how to say that sin, in terms of the ways that we repeat these ways of being that just reinforce not just the survival and the things that you find the beauty in terms of what's sharp, but that reinforce the harm and that reinforce that, well, they'll figure it out once they're grown up, or that they, at one point, they won't be my responsibility. So I'm just wondering, when that generation reads that book, I'm just wondering when that generation reads that book and the kind of affect that would generate. And I would hope that they find healing in the ways that you end up saying, this person is beautiful because X and Y, this is what I learned from this person.
Yeah.
But this is also why it needs to change, or this is also why it needs to heal, and this is what healing looks like.
Yeah, and I think that person won't like the book. I'm very okay with this book being a little harder to digest, because I think it's hard to have someone say, and that might be fucked up. I think it's one thing for me to be like, and I messed up, and I did this, and then I changed and did this other thing, and then I failed. That's what the first book was. The second one does the, like, and I think you need to change your behavior. And you could tell it in the ratings, y'all. So my last book released on the same exact date. And today, like the day of release, it had a 4.9 rating on Goodreads. This book is a 4.3. And I think it does. I think it like nos enoja.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
I think
Le da coraje a mucha gente. Sí, sí, sí.
yeah, and I'm okay with that. I think that it's a different type of book. This stuff needs to be repackaged for a different type of audience. It needs to be challenging for a different type of person who, again, isn't going to pick up Brown Girls, but might pick up this one and be pissed that I said all those things. But we're not always ready to read the books that we need.
Yeah.
I wasn't. There was so many bell hook stuff that I was like, fuck yeah. Like with my chest, with my full chest. And like I had to revisit the text like years later because there's just things that we're not ready to hear at the time that they're being said. And I think that's okay. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I think that that's like the optimism that I have in terms of thinking about what will remain, even if somebody puts it down because it was too much mirroring, it was too hard to digest, or they saw
like you don't know me.
Like you don't really know. I do that, but right. And then because it's also sometimes because when we're reading these texts, especially, all these women are very much steeped in a culture not only that shapes them, but it's the thing that sustains them.
Yeah.
So to like
gives them purpose.
Pull one thread
just
means that you probably are going to unravel something that is going to leave you sin el piso, without a floor, without anything to stand on, which is again why I also see you writing yourself into the text. And La Tía Loca. Right, and that's what happens to her, and nobody wants to be La Tía Loca. Necessarily, right? That within these systems. And
it's how we like abandon each other when we're not willing to be accountable for all the messy shit, because it isn't all great. And I think we either want it to be great or terrible. And I'm in the gray. I'm like, what if it's both? What if I really, really, really love you and need you in my life, and I need to tell you that I'm not going to pick up your random FaceTime because I don't have the emotional capacity for what you bring to the table? Like that, those two things happen at the same time for me.
And you leave it muddied, which is the beautiful thing. It's like, no, I'm not going to resolve it, but these are different pathways and different ways of seeing it, and we're just going to have to sit in it. So I put it down, right? It's like, so it has wine and oil and tears and all the things as I was reading in different settings and just needing to really dive into it. And so I'm thinking also, el chisme que hay aquí, like the things, because you're writing about real people and experiences as you're thinking about your tías and your primas and your experiences. So I'm wondering, I know that you went home to do research and to have conversations. So can you say...
I do say this is like no one archetype is one person, and it is an amalgamation of a lot of people to clear that, because there is heavy stuff, and I don't want it to be like, and I was talking about my tia Laura, you know what I mean? Like I didn't want that. And I was, even with the images, I moved images around because they're all family members. 98% of them are family members, but I moved images around on purpose because I was like, no, you will not really pin down this person. But there is chisme, but I'm trying to gray all that, because I think in the details is where the magic happens with a lot of this. Like if I was just like vague, y esta tía that everyone talks bad about. That's one sentence. You know what I mean? Yeah. I needed the...
No, it's the tia that wears the purple short skirt.
Yeah.
And a matching top. And I'm like, I want to see that tia.
And who I've heard women in my family say, like, her kids don't all look alike. I needed that. That, like, added that element that we know we've heard. We know lo que están insinuando. And so I wanted that. I wanted that, like, juice. But just like, okay, so how do I move it away from this person, add this other detail that isn't her? So it's moving it's mixing, moving, combining. Like you were, I don't know if you saw yourself in one of
Oh,
them.
I totally did. I was like, I did. I read it, and then I downloaded the audiobook today to kind of hear you, because I think that if you buy the book and hear the book, because listening to you tell the story is just a very different.
Yeah.
It adds to the cadence in terms of how you're weaving the story.
Yeah.
And I did see myself. I was like, that was me. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah.
But it was lovely.
But I left it gray.
Yes.
That nobody would know.
Nobody could.
And I will never say, you know?
And I won't tell you.
Yeah. So it's that, like I did with that. Like, of course, I'm informed by the conversations I have with my friends. And I say, like, everyone's a tia or a prima. Mm-hmm. And so, like, a lot of us are functioning in these roles. And so when I'm interacting with friends, I'm seeing this tia. And so, yeah, I was like, oh, this feels like my sister was running through all the names of my cousins and aunts. And I was like, yeah, that's that one. Yeah, that's that one. Yeah, that. Like I did have people that inspired stuff, but it is very emphasis on inspired because there were a lot of other things that I took into consideration to make it all come to life, and even myself. So it might have been inspired by somebody, but I also identify with that reality. And so I meshed in my experiences into that story.
And that it is like what you're doing is not a rejection of, but it's an embracing of all of it, and an understanding of this is what made me and shaped me, and the beauty and the harm within family systems or within my own family. And so it's I'll say prayer for embracing all of it, for that sense of acceptance and of being able to be together as one. So it's not, the critique is not about rejection. The critique is about embrace. The critique is about healing.
Yeah.
Because even as you're talking about the matriarch and saying, you know, and we've seen it in the archetypes of newer movies that are coming out in terms of graying and complexifying the characters, but also being, no, this is my character. This is my matriarch. This is the abuela figure, although it's not a tia or a prima, but tias and primas are matriarchs in the making, and you do say that. And so what does it mean for you to take a role of leadership, of home in the family, that it's also healing for yourself? So it's not, I have a colleague that doesn't talk about self-sacrifice, she talks about gifting. And that's the difference between that sense of constant peril, especially to one's body and against your own health, because you want to sustain your family a toda costa.
Yeah. And the thing that I think we do a lot of, well, I'm just like this because, like, I'm a Virgo. Or, well, I'm just like this because my mom never hugged me. Or whatever, but we have, like, and it ends with a period. Instead of like, and then what? Mm-hmm. And that's the book, is that, and then what? Mm-hmm. Like there's all this, there's so many forces against women of color, against Latinas, immigrants. There's so many forces at play that dictate how we act, how we treat each other, how we treat ourselves. So it is like explaining the harm, and then what?
And then you do that. You're because I know you also read so much theory, so much feminist theory, so much cultural theory in terms of how to make sense of these practices in a way that people are able to identify, you know, this is the thing that we need to heal from. This is the problem. Yeah. And so in a lot of these chapters, like, shame is the problem. Yeah. Because shame is the thing that does not allow you to move forward. That's the thing that doesn't allow you to grow and to heal and to have the hard conversations. Yeah. And so that's why you look away from the mirror, right? Because you do not want to see that reflection.
Yeah. And I think it's like a thing, there's nowhere in the world where I position myself as like freed from all these things. That is not how I wrote the book. That is not what I want the book to be like heard or digested. It isn't. It is as someone who's like struggling, actively struggling with all of these things. like leading up to the book release, the I was in my perfect prima era. I was like, oh, I should have done that better. I could have said that cleaner. Why did I even put that sentence in there? And I was beating myself up until we got up here. So I struggle with a lot of these things, and the point isn't to say, here's a wound and fuck you for still having it. It is like, here's a wound, and doesn't that suck? Like, isn't it so cruel how we got it? And isn't it awful how we just pass it? And it's just sitting in that. I just want to sit in that and name it and leave it there. And then whatever the reader needs to do with it, they'll do with it.
Yeah. You're not looking in.
Yeah.
You're very much part of the text. And so that's why, like, again, it's very fleshy. It's embodied. It takes a minute to really see everything that you've done because it's so rich. And you're able to bring these. So I like how you took pieces of theory and just weaved it into the text to say, you might not read bell hooks, and then at another point, you might not read Simone de Beauvoir, but here it is. Yeah. This is what's grounding and weaving the things that we are living and experiencing. And so it's a way of also bringing academic discourse that has sat and thought about these things really deeply, but people do not have access to it. So it's just very accessible in the sense of mirroring, of bringing and bridging this type of literature. So
and it was hard because it's also text. I got to read text like Women Who Run with Wolves. I've owned for over a decade. Somebody gave it to me in grad school and was like, you need to read it. And I think I got into the intro and was like I was like, this is dance. And it's not required for school. Ooh. It's going to be a not today. And that kept happening with the book until I got to, I was like, okay, I want to write. I know what this book conceptually is about. It's about these archetypes in storytelling. And I want to write a version that doesn't put me to sleep and doesn't put a reader of mine who is not a required text. It just isn't. And so who isn't going to pick up that book and just digest it and be like, wow, growth. And so it is a moment of like, there are these fundamental texts that exist out there. And it's so hard to read them because a lot of these academics just aren't writers. And that's okay. But they're still required to produce knowledge. Yeah. And so at some point, it's about being like, okay, I'll read it. I'll read it because I'm being paid at this point, and I will digest it and make it palatable.
I really like also how you talk about not just blood relatives, but you're also talking about the ways that we expand, and particularly in this case, like Latino culture expands family or adopted family, right? So we call it hermano de crianza or tía de crianza. So the brother you grew up with, but you're not actually related. You grew up with them. So that's what crianza means. We were raised together. And so it's, again, knowing and loving the women who raised us. Like, it's also that sense of adoptive family and the ways that we do not see, or in your case, right, in these archetypes, do not see these lines of blood is not thicker than water. It's the ways that you form a bond. Yeah.
And I think I've understood chosen family as a concept, maybe because I am queer, or maybe because my sister, who's here, is adopted. And so I understood that, like, you could love someone deeply and you cannot have any blood relation with that person. But I have understood that family looks really differently and can be very vast. And people ask me a lot about my parents, like, what do they think about what I'm doing? My parents don't read my stuff. My parents don't acknowledge that I am a writer. I hear that they save articles and images, but I don't get any of that from them. So I've had to be intentional about having community around me who's excited for me, who does hold me down, sisters. I've created new family to to feel fully held in the ways that my family can't fully do. So yeah, I was intentional throughout the book. Like, Tías and Primas don't have to be your blood relatives. Like, I have so many. Cristian is a tia of mine, even if she won't claim it. Cristian de la Torre is one of I would say one of the more formidable theological education Latinas. She's in BU, and she's just kind of always encouraged me in a way that I've needed her, and I've needed a woman that age who looks like she looks. Who looks very indigenous, long black hair, brown, and like has a thick accent when she talks to me. I've needed her to say, "You got this. I'm so proud of you." And so I've understood family to be a lot more than blood.
Because it's about, like, I think the role that you embody and the responsibility that people take in your life to take up that role.
Yeah.
So I have many nieces and nephews and 3 goddaughters, and none of them are related to me.
Yeah.
Right. So it's Berantiti. And so I take that very seriously, and I'm prima to you. I'm prima to, like, because it's a role that goes beyond talking about friendship, or goes beyond it's a responsibility to take up that role in terms of I am in relationship to you in a familiar way.
Yeah, and I want to make sure that you're good and you stay alive and you are well in this world. Yeah. It's like an intentional way of making community. Yeah.
Anything else that you want to, like, what was your favorite tia or your favorite prima to write?
There were a lot. I really love the matriarch. I feel like the matriarch, la matriarca, like, fell out of me. I wrote her in one sitting. It had minimal edits, and it felt like I had been waiting to write mi abuelita into a story since she died. It was like, people can't forget her. How do I make sure she's never left behind? Because our stories don't get centered, and when you look like us, we just, like, we can disappear if we don't hold on to each other. So it was like, I've been waiting to write her down and make her into flesh again for years. And I think it was my favorite because it was the fastest. But it was also my favorite because she's just a beautiful person who needed to be written about.
Yeah, and it's a beautiful first chapter. I think that it really draws you in, and it kind of tells you this is what this is about. And I think that was, for me, the turn. When I'm reading and I'm thinking, this is, it's the story of these archetypes, and we're talking about critiquing a system or critiquing, and when I say critique, not necessarily in a negative connotation, but just like deeply engaging with these issues and deeply engaging with these practices, and then suddenly, oh, this book is about healing.
It's not good on you.
It was bien fuerte.
You texted me.
I
you
texted
were like
you right afterwards, I didn't see this coming, and I need to stop because I won't do this on time. If every chapter is like this, we might not make it to the 10th. Because it was very special because, again, like I know that everybody is going to see themselves within different archetypes or see someone they know. And there are some archetypes that they won't see because a lot is also about migration. A lot is about the ways that we continue to. So mi tía de WhatsApp, for example. Like, I love how you put her there as someone who is important in the family too. And although we might not all have a tía de WhatsApp, we do have the ways in which, for many of our family members, WhatsApp and emojis. And the way they save emojis.
Yeah.
And then you get like new emojis that are more complex, and they just love them and they just collect them. And, instead of saying one emoji, they're like these 4.
And it's the perfect one.
It is the perfect ones for that emotion. And they'll have messages, and they get more elaborate and long. And But the way that you like also include it, right? You included the details as much as possible, right? Because again, like, we can keep thinking about metaphors, and we keep thinking about all these people that shape us. But you were able to really bring a little bit of everybody. And I think within the matriarch, it's this, you were also breaking the imaginary of who these people are seem to be, and kind of like and fleshing them and being, no, this was a real person. Because the farther away that we are, because that's the distance that family sometimes and adults place in children, as you're talking a lot, your experience as a child with these women is you don't get to know them. So I loved La Young Tia, because I had a young tia, and she was the one that I could be like, oh, this is what I'm going to look like when I grow up, because 30 looks so old. And now 30 looks so young. I was like, I want to be 30 again. Because you don't see yourself in any of these adults, right? You get to see yourself in this tia. And again, it's a journeying, as you're reading, it's a journeying through your own childhood and your own healing and your own ways of, even your own ways to understand la prima que no te cae bien, like the prima that you don't like, or to understand. That's like, I hear like a lot of primas that we don't like, they exist. The family members that you don't like, or, and you still found redemption, right? Because again, you're placing this in a larger scope of this is how culture shapes us. And this is how also culture hinders our relationships, hinders our conversations.
And these are things I've had to learn, like, on the go, right? Like, I became really radicalized and wrote a lot of books around racism and colorism and toxic masculinity, and was just like, me enojé with everybody I was raised by. And then I was like, wait, no, I'm alone. So it was like, okay, I can't throw these people away. The whole system throws them away. So I need to find ways to build bridges to them, and I need them more than I was willing to admit at that particular period in my life. So it was about like, we can't throw these people away. Like, the way that we are living through systemic oppression is so much more complicated. Power is so much more harder for people to move through. Lack of power, powerlessness, dignity, all this stuff is stuff that people are contending with. These women are contending with. So they have to be redeemable, because they are facing everything and are still finding ways to survive it. So then I have to find a way to redeem them. And I think they are redeemable. They're absolutely redeemable.
Are you, because so the conclusion is a love letter to the specific Tías and Primas of yours. Are you, do they know these pieces that you wrote?
I think in my parents' denial of what I do, in my trying to show respect to them, I haven't, it's public. Everybody knows I write. There's like, I'm not hiding my, But
it's hard to.
Yeah, and the first book was translated to Spanish, so family could get access to it. But I think in my insistence of not, like, if they're not gonna acknowledge it, then I'm not gonna reach out to that one tia. You know what I mean? And be like, you should read my book. You inspired this part. Blah blah blah. Like, that feels. There's an element of like, that's me, mommy's sister, and I don't. That's somebody she talks to regularly. That's somebody that keeps her sane regularly. She's not relying on me to keep her sane. I might actually make things worse for her sometimes. So it's like I've not been like, hey, you inspired this one thing. I would love for you to read it. I love your thoughts. No.
So what? Can I keep asking questions, or should I leave
this
other question for when we're in private? Okay. But then what does that mean for you as you're building these bridges and kind of healing for yourself, but also wanting to maintain family?
I'm still navigating that, for sure. And I have my own my cousins are different than my tias, for sure. And so it's also, no one's been able to be in the U.S. but our family for a really long time. And one of my closest cousins, who did inspire the perfect prima archetype, now lives in the U.S., is on a visa, and she lives in D.C. And so we've talked about hanging out, and I'm reconstructing that now that we can have access to each other in a different way. But it's all in flux. It's all moving. I think with my cousins, I have a better, especially my cousins who've always have known my real thoughts about things. You know, I wasn't scared of them, and they told me their real thoughts about things. So we kind of like commute. I have one particular cousin who we've always been close, and now that she's here, I am interested in what that relationship looks like. She's still really Christian, and I think that I'm very controversial to Christian, like the particular Christianity that I grew up with. I'm very controversial to it. And I think she puts me somewhere, where I'm allowed to be me, but no one else is allowed to be me. And so I think we have like a lot to navigate, but I think it will happen, and I'm looking forward to it. She does have a kid, and I'm not really good with kids. That's a skill I'm trying to figure out. My sister maybe will teach me how to be better with kids. Cause wait, am I allowed to tell people? Okay, she's pregnant and is about to have her first kid, and that's the closest person in my life who's about to have a kid. Most of my older friends, their kids are like teenagers or whatever, you know, like my age friends that I didn't have to contend with like a little person. So yeah, that's also a skill for me. I'm still learning kids.
Which I think that one of my
They make me nervous. They say things. I'm like, wait, I feel insulted.
Can I really explain what this means?
Can I be honest with you? Am I gonna get in trouble?
What are the lies that you're telling them? So I don't reinforce them.
Yeah. So I'm just like with most kids right now. Yeah.
But I think that one of my favorite tias is the childless tia, actually, as you wrote her. And I was like, look at that. Look at like vindication, like in a way that is just really beautiful of the things that, you know, not just the discourses that we hear and the things that we know to contend in terms of the complexities of childbearing, but you wrote this tia really beautifully, and you wrote every tia and every prima really beautifully, even the ones that were hard for you to write because you might not see yourself in them as much. But I love the childless tia, and she's beautiful.
I love her too.
Yeah.
She's complicated for me. She was like, I waited till the end to write her. I don't think I was ready to write her. And I don't even think I wrote her ready. I just wrote her. And then, because I think there's a lot of reasons a lot of us are child-free. I think it's like it's a very millennial thing. A lot of us are finding ourselves in this situation. I think it has a lot to do with like class, access to healthcare, good healthcare. I think there's like a lot of stuff that come into play with why a lot of us are nearing 35 and being like, well, I ran out of time. I think that's a thing. And I think some of us also are in the reality of like, I never wanted them, fuck those kids, and like, I'm okay with it. Like, I think that there's a lot of ways in which this tia manifests herself. I found myself on the camp of infertility, and then realizing, oh, like I love sleeping in. I love getting high at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I love, like, I don't have to check in with anybody. I can cook what I want to eat. Like, those things are things that I have found joy in, but it has been a conclusion and not like a thing I built up to as the goal. It's been a conclusion to a lot of really heartbreaking realities that led me there. So I wrote her from that place, and I know it's not everyone's story if you're child-free, but it was the only way I felt like I could write it.
Yeah. I think that, so as you're writing her and saying, like, I love the conversations that you're having inside your head as you're writing also the book as the narrator, because in this chapter and also the widowed tia, they're like, you could see what was in your head, but for the sake of, you know, ethnographic research, because you do a lot. And letting the truth come to you or reveal itself instead of you also imposing your worldviews, kind of like seeing what's there. You're working with what's there, not just, so that's part of the beauty of the contention of everything. Because you're saying in childless tias, the childless tia is even though I say this to people when people ask me, and it's not true or it's not the full truth, I don't want to give you or reinforce the narrative.
Yeah.
And I'm going to live with my own complexities. But saying it here, I think it also frees a lot of people in terms of saying, oh, it's not clean cut.
Yeah.
It's not a yes or a no.
Yeah.
It's a circumstantial, contextual.
Yeah.
You have to deal with the realities that nothing is linear. And I think that that's also what this book does. It's like, it's not linear. So you can't even place a timeline necessarily in terms of how these tias are shaped or when or how. It's just part of this beautiful way of just living.
Yeah.
And you do it with the widowed tia, when you're like, is this what you, wanting to ask her, you know, is this why you really love being this way? Was your husband this way? And she's like not giving you anything, right? She's
nothing.
just like telling you the story that she wants to tell.
Yeah. Yeah. And contending. So I read about this widowed tia as like the tia who looks like exceptionally happy. But she's not like cursing her ex-husband. She's not even talking bad about him. It's almost like she's just okay. She's like, se murió pues. And so she's just living, and I have this encounter of like, wait, then why are we all? Because there is so much, I don't know about y'all, but like the tia who never gets married is such a conversation topic in a family, in Latine families. Like, we do not let that shit go. And so it's just like, ¿y el novio? ¿Y por qué no tienes novio? Déjame darte some advice.
¿Qué estás haciendo mal tú?
Yeah, hay que vestirte diferente. No, es porque it's your fault, obviously. You're not dressing enough or sexy enough, or maybe you're too smart. But it would be like, I have sat through hours of those conversations that I'm like, and then I'm looking at the widowed tia who looks perfectly happy, and I'm like, when these things don't match, what are you talking about? Like, what is it that we're really pushing for? Because she's living some sort of like dream that we don't want to sell. I don't know. It was complicated, and I talk about it as complicated. Yeah. So.
Yeah, love that. Thank you. I think we can take some questions from the audience.
Yeah, we're gonna do questions if y'all have any.
Comments.
Hi. I have a comment and a question, but my comment is, one of my most recent realizations in therapy is that I don't know how to take care of somebody without hurting myself. And that's not, like, I'm just not taught that because I'm not modeled that with all the women in my life. It's, you know, you should be hurting yourself. But I know as a counselor, the irony is, in order to most effectively take care of someone, you have to take care of yourself.
Yeah.
Why? I don't know why we're not taught that, but that is what I'm trying to learn. How do I meet my emotional needs? And how do I take care of myself? And this is just me taking care of my dogs. It's not even like a child. Like, my dog has lower back pain, like me and my mom, and I don't know how I pass that on to my animals, but
Generational.
It is. How did it go? Anyways, so I'm on this whole healing journey I feel like all of us are on right now, and we just have this privilege in this generation to be able to learn how to thrive instead of just survive, and that's the mentality I don't know how to have, because even talking to my mom now, it's just, you need security. Everything you're doing is scary. Why did you move away from us? So that's why I'm like, well, and I want to show her that, and she is seeing that. And I would say in the last month, for the first time, people are listening to me. And I say that because my mom has come to me seeking advice. And my entire life, I've just been trying to prove to her that I'm an adult, and I'm 33 with a doctorate, a professor, and that's what it took, like, into those years. But anyways, the thing is as I'm on this journey, I'm seeing all the fucked upness that comes through, and I'm wondering, for those of us that we're going through this, and we see ourselves across many tias and primas, and we're like, holy shit, I'm really fucked up. Because what do you say to those women that suddenly feel overwhelmed with all of this healing work they see they have to do that you shed a light on? And they're like, I want to do it, but I'm also paralyzed by all the work that apparently has to be done inwardly too. Yeah.
That is so big. Yeah. Did you really have to put me out there on the first one? That's so big. Do you have an answer for that?
I teach pastoral theology and care, so I'm happy to
Pastora, go.
go. No, I'm just thinking about like how to deal with the paralyzing. So because there were several things, right? Like the paralyzing amount of not just work and healing, but just how to walk through it and go through it, right? So I think that's when you start finding who your people are and building community. And sometimes because we are, maybe a lot of you don't have community in Nashville or not from Nashville, so came to Nashville. So I've been in Nashville just for 3 years. And the needing of people, the needing of community, and sometimes that, I would say almost always, supersedes whatever else goal or achievement, in the sense that the two things have to be paired. It's because we are living in a linear culture of success and achievement, and that is the thing that has value. And so it doesn't matter the things that you had to say no to or the things that you negated because you got the doctorate, because you achieved, because you crossed the threshold. But then when you cross that threshold, you conditioned your body so much to just continue to find that way of living until the next thing. And so we do not know how to be in the present. And I think it's like, how do you cultivate the present, but also building systems and networks of people that will sustain you in that way? And I'm not saying that it has to be people that are with you 24/7, but it's people that you know that are point persons, that are anchors, either in the same place that you live or separate from home. So if you have that connection somewhere else that is not here in Nashville, reach out and kind of then build that bridge. Because I think that that's, going back to the work that you're doing, is that, like, how do I'm healing these parts and I want them to materialize. It's not just about the ideal of how to make this, but the reason why this is enfleshed, and my hope and optimism with the people that pick up this book and put it down because it's too painful, the healing, or I see too much of myself, is that is a seed that eventually will become a bridge towards somewhere else.
I don't have a conclusion on the book for a reason, because what I did at the end was basically thank all the actual Tías and Primas in my life, because what I meant to do by that is say, like, you don't need to figure it all out. Like, this shit's really hard. And I'm gonna love you regardless. Like, you're still worthy of love. You're still worthy of my love. And that was the only way to end it. Because what was I supposed to say at the end of all that? Because I name all this stuff and how it's freaking hard. And then at the end, I was like, well, you know what? Mi tía Lorena, you're so strong. And you have loved your husband when everyone else told you you weren't worthy of his love. You have loved your kids when everybody else was telling you to kick them out. It was just that. Like, just hold them in all of that complexity. I don't think we need to be perfect. We don't need to have it figured out. So maybe you're in your perfect prima era too. I struggle too, so yeah. Thanks. Yeah.
I wish I had already read it, and so you might have addressed it already, but I grew up in India, so it's very much, your aunts and your neighbors are your aunts and all that kind of stuff, so I know what you're talking about in a certain way. But I realize now, as a middle-aged woman, that when I was growing up, there was always a little bit of comparison in my mind going on, with comparison of my mother to all my tias, right? And your mother, you kind of take for granted, or I did. And I thought my tias were so cool, especially a childless tia who is my aunt, who is like showering me with love, who's the second mom. I saw a chapter here. So I'm wondering if you address the tension between like how you see your mother and how you see your aunts, and as a grown person, then how do you reconcile with that?
So I have a chapter that my mom very much inspired, and it's called The Dignified Tia. My mom's the oldest daughter. And so she, as the oldest daughter, I think she had, like, there's this story that they tell. So she had an older brother, for the record. But one of my youngest uncle was getting beaten up at school. And I think their age difference might be 9 years. And he came and told my mom. And my mom, and they were kids, my mom said she rolled up her sleeves and ran to find that boy and beat him up. Which I'm like, a la gran, okay. But mi mami was sort of like, as the eldest daughter, she was tasked with protecting her siblings. She was tasked with knowing things. She was also the only one that has left Nicaragua. And so she migrated to new lands, and she just is a teacher for sure and takes that role really seriously. But as a first, I think what's happened is that she's like, I have scraped through the valley of the dead with my fingernails till they fell off. I have fought everything, figured out everything for all of you. And so she sort of positions herself as she can't ever be wrong. And so I call her a dignified Tia because like her dignity and her pride is everything. Mm-hmm. And I love that about her. It made me who I am today, for better or for worse. And so I do talk about like, it was hard to grow up with a mom who knew everything, who predicted everything, who wasn't really warm with me. But I had other tias I had the young tia who was cool and like Gloria Trevi, and I had different tias who like brought excitement and just passion to my life. But I do have like this contentious relationship with my own mommy, as I have become almost a dignified tia. And I almost wrote the conclusion. The first sentence of my conclusion was going to be, so this whole book is written like a dignified tia, and that's just honest. Because it was like, I'm just acting like I know everything. And like I figured it all out. And this is just me continuing this pattern. And my editor was like, I don't think you need to say that. Everyone's going to know. I was like, wow, rude. So
it just means you did a really good job at describing her.
Right. So yeah, there is a mother figure on there that I really have like strong conversations with, and ultimately do try to redeem, because there's a lot that she had to deal with to be who she is, and as strong as she is, and as figuring everything out as she is. She couldn't count on anyone but herself. So yeah, I'm excited for you to read it. It'll be fun, I think. Thanks.
Prisca, are we gonna get a Tíos and Primos?
Oh.
And I say that because, and then you alluded to it, but just the society of like the men, and I think especially in Nashville, you've probably seen this, but there's such a lack of like positive male Latino leaders, and there's so much expectation on our Latinos here, and my heart breaks for them, and I also don't know how to talk to them. So like, what are your, I guess, thoughts on cultivating relationships with our tíos, with our primos, with our hermanos, honoring our men in the community while also having to like balance the men in our community?
To be honest, I don't think I've experienced enough growth for it. Yeah. Like, I think that's a hard, and it's so the bell hooks, All About Love is the book that I couldn't get through for years, because it was like, men die more because of sexism. The statistics are that it's harming them more. And I was like, fuck this. And I like threw it. Like, I don't think I'm there yet. I think because I grew up as, so this is a prima in the book. It's the prima who doesn't like other women, who's very skeptical and more critical of other women, who's very willing to, men can say the same thing as the women are saying, but the men make more sense. And I grew up as that prima. I was a daddy's girl, and he would confide in me his marital problems with my mom, and I took his side. And it took me years to realize how terrible that was for me. I didn't have very many girlfriends growing up. I thought, girls are so dramatic. Yeah, I'm in recovery. And I wanted always to prove myself to men first because of this wound and this relationship I had with my dad. And it took me getting married the first time to realize how terrible that must have been for my mom and how much he isolated her with me. And so, yeah, I don't think I've healed enough to be like, it's time to embrace the man. Like, I think I've been doing, it's been like almost 2 decades of me doing penance for what I thought was really harmful in the ways that I internalized. Like, men are just smarter and logical, and it's better to be raise boys than girls. It's easier. Like, those weird things about sexism that we just like internalize and accept as truth, and it really just harms a lot of girls, including myself. But I swallowed it. I took it, and I was like, yeah, that makes so much sense. No. So yeah, I think somebody else can do that though. I'm cheering them on. It's someone else's calling, but definitely not mine. Yeah. Yeah. Somebody asked me that, and it's a reel on my Instagram. They were like, "What about writing a book for men?" And I had a rifle, and I shot that question down. So that's how I feel about it.
I think that, didn't Latino Rebels come after Latina Rebels?
No.
The Latino Rebels was, what was
Oh
first?
yeah, they came before.
They came before you?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Julio came before, and I told him, I was like, so y'all know Latino Rebels existed for a really long time as a like Latino media, and I wrote him like, yeah, you me creo. I'm like a grad student in my 20s, and I messaged him. I was like, I think y'all miss a lot. And I noticed that most of your journalists are men. And I just don't think you understand the Latina experience. And so I made a page called Latina Rebels. And he was like, oh, I'm so proud of you. I'll support you. Like, too nice. I was like, fuck you. But yeah, they started first.
Okay. Just thinking, like, in terms of what does it mean that for people do their own labor?
Yes.
In terms of that. Yeah.
Years of it, but thank you all for coming.
Thank
this
you.
was really fun. Thank you.